Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by the beautiful alyse.wax. Alyse, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing so much better now. Good evening to you. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. A little bit about you, though. Before we talk about why you're here, I want the people that don't know you to get to know you here for a second.
Okay.
Alyse is a writer, and the X-Files is what made her want to become a writer at age 13. Side note, is there anybody that will really argue that the X-Files was totally a horror show?
I
Like,
certainly hope not, because I'll fight them. I'll beat them into a bloody pulp if they try to say. You can say that it was sci-fi horror. You can say that there was a relationshipy aspect to it, but it was downright horror-y.
I mean, Final Destination started as an X-Files episode.
Mhm.
So, I mean,
Yep.
like, is anybody going to argue that the Final Destination franchise isn't horror? Like, I'm totally with you. X-Files, 100% horror in my opinion.
Yeah.
And you are a graduate from USC's film school.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I
Thank you.
graduated third grade and it was quite difficult. So I can only imagine what USC was. And here's what's amazing to me. You went to USC Film School, and the amount of things that you've done when it comes to writing to me is just absolutely outstanding. You were the associate editor of fearnet.com briefly, the editor-in-chief of Dread Central. You're currently the horror editor at collider.com, but you've written for Fangoria, Coming Soon, Bloody Disgusting, Sci-Fi Wire, and more. Like, that's amazing. Like, you've written for these zines and things that we've been reading since we were young. I mean, Fangoria, like, to no matter what ever happens in the spectrum of the world, no one can ever take alyse.wax away from Fangoria or
Yeah.
Dread Central or, these things, like I said, Collider, Sci-Fi Wire. Like, these are amazing. Bloody Disgusting. Like, what's it like to be in all these different things that are such a big, huge influence in the genre that we love so much?
Um, it's pretty it's astounding. I mean, I have to admit, when I was first the day that I got my first Fangoria magazine with my name published in it was kind of overwhelming. I went out immediately and bought like 10 copies of it because I was so
My girl.
ecstatic. I remember when I was a little kid and buying Fangorias, I thought one day I'm going to see my name in this magazine. I didn't know how, I didn't know in what way, but I would see my name in that magazine. And, a billion years later, here I am.
And you know what? Like, that's such a phenomenal story because that's something that we've all done as children. If we set that goal and you achieved something that you all, and it's something we've all at one point said, I'm going to be in this.
Yeah.
We could even go Dr. Hook, the cover of the Rolling Stone, but for us, it was Fangoria. That's what we wanted. We wanted to be in Fangoria. And you've done, and not only that, but you've written 3 books at the time of this episode. Trust me, there'll be
Mhm.
plenty more to come. But Curious Goods, Behind the Scenes of Friday the 13th, the series, The World of It, and Creepy Bitches.
Mhm.
Now, one thing I want to know, what is the difference? Everybody looks at, writing is writing. Not the case. What is the difference between writing for like a Fangoria or a Dread Central in comparison to writing your own book? Like, what are the differences in doing the two of those?
Um, well, the length. I mean, when you're writing for an article for, a website or a magazine, it's, a few pages at most. So it, you know, takes maybe a couple of days or something. A book is a lot longer. Um, it's there's just so much more that goes into a book. There's a lot more research. There's a lot more time and stress. And in some ways, in a lot of ways, I mean, I think that, a book, I feel like the book is more personal in some ways.
Sure.
Um, At least for me, because Curious Goods was my first book, and that was a true passion project. That was, my favorite show, Friday the 13th, the series, which I know we're gonna talk about later, but,
I'm sure we're gonna.
ah, but that's the movie. That's
I,
not the
I know,
TV
I
show.
know.
You're close, but that's okay. Um, and so that was like a dream project of mine. And so it was very, very personal. World of It was something that was an assignment basically, and I was asked to do it and I did so gladly, but it still felt very personal because I was putting in so much time and effort. And basically I was given something like 3 weeks to get a first draft in, which
Man,
was a little bit exhausting. And Creepy Bitches, again, it was something that was very personal. And that one, I didn't actually write the whole thing. I edited it with a friend of mine, Dr. Rebecca McKendry. And I wrote a chapter in it and we edited it together, a bunch of essays from other women. But yeah,
that's awesome.
so it
And that's
feels
something
very
I
personal.
yeah, and that's something I love about horror is horror has always been ahead of the curve when it comes to social issues and just flat out justice. In the 70s, you had the final girl, who at that time, men were still the superior sex or whatever, but you had these girls beating the hell out of the guys, and I still think one of the best final girls of all time, Olivia Hussey in Black Christmas, you have her showing real power. And
Hmm.
horror has always done that, whether it's been about race or sex or religion. It's always been ahead of where other things were, and I think to this day it's still going that route. And women really run the genre, and I think it's amazing. And I think that's what makes horror so special.
Hmm.
And people can argue it all they want, but I would dare someone, literally, please try me to find a movie that was filmed on a $200,000 budget and made over 2.44 million in the box office the way that Terrifier 2 just did, and tell me that horror doesn't run the world. So the next time
Oh
you hear
yeah.
someone talking about horror, remember that.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
at least in order for you to write horror, horror had to start for you somewhere. So here
Hmm.
for a second, I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie, and at least the first horror movie you watched was.
Well, the first horror movie I ever watched was Nightmare on Elm Street. It was either 4 or 5. I don't remember. I remember watching it as a kid. I was about 10 years old and I was at a friend's house and we watched it in secret. Um, and I was like, wow, this Freddy Krueger guy isn't scary at all. And that's about the extent of my memory of it. What really got me into the horror genre was around the same time it was a Saturday morning, about 10:30 a.m., and I was channel surfing and I was looking for cartoons as any normal 10-year-old would. And I came across a scene on television and it just had these pulsing boils. And I was just fascinated. They were roiling and they were ooey and gooey and leaking. And it was, I couldn't turn away from them. And I watched and I watched and I kept watching. And then the show was over and I had to know everything about it. And it turned out the show was an episode of Friday the 13th, the series. And the episode was Stick It in Your Ear. And that was it. An obsession was born. And I was absolutely hooked. That was it. It was all over for me at that point.
Right. And the good thing about this is that I have the link to that episode because that episode is available here on YouTube. So I have the link for that episode down here in the description. And if you
Okay.
look just below that, you'll see the link to all of Alyse's social media accounts. So make sure that you're following her on social media so you can stay up to date on everything that she's doing and what she has coming up in her life. So we know that you were quite the young lady, and I know that you said you don't remember much about Nightmare on Elm Street 4 or 5, whichever it was that you watched. So I would really like to focus on the Stick It in Your Ear episode of Friday the 13th, because that's obviously stuck with you more to the point to where you wrote a book about the series. Now, do you remember, obviously we talked about the boil scene. For this episode, it's going to be a little harder for me to go with my regular scheduled program. So I'm going to kind of just
Sure.
bounce around here a little bit with some questions. Can you kind of give me like a little summary of what happens throughout that episode?
Well, it's about a cursed hearing aid and an antique hearing aid. I don't know, it's gross, but basically a mentalist, he puts it in his ear and he can hear other people's thoughts. And but the problem is that if he listens too much and he doesn't transfer these thoughts into somebody else's head, he explodes. And that's what the boils and stuff, they show that he's gradually growing too many of these tumorous voices. Um, and Friday the 13th, this series, it was every episode was about there was basically it was these two cousins who inherit an antique shop that was owned by an uncle that they didn't know, who had made a deal with the devil to sell cursed antiques. And he broke the pact, and which is how he died. And they have to get the items back. They can't be destroyed, so they have to get them back and put them into the vault downstairs. And each item carries a deadly curse. So you get something in return, but it has to kill somebody in exchange. So for example, like there's a pool cue that if you kill somebody with it, you win your next pool game. Or there's a scarecrow that will give you good harvests if you kill somebody with it. Or there's a two-faced painting, a double-sided painting, that if you kill somebody, you can, and push them through it, you can go through into the time of the Marquis de Sade, and you can bring back paraphernalia from that time period. You know, it's all kind of weird, but for the most part, it's you gain something in return.
Well, and
And
who doesn't love a good anthology series?
it
You know,
it it's interesting because it wasn't quite an anthology series, because it was structured like an anthology series, but you still had the same characters
sure.
throughout. You had Mickey and Ryan, who were the cousins, and their friend Jack, who was kind of the older soothsayer. But it really was structured because there wasn't ever any kind of um, ongoing, it wasn't serialized in any way.
Well, I mean, 'cause I checked out "Stick It in Your Ear" today,
Mhm.
and that episode literally starts out with a bang. You literally are getting the boils on the guy's face right at the very beginning of the episode, and you're like, "Huh, I need to figure out what the hell's going on here." So,
Yeah.
now, do you have? We know which scene affected you most, obviously, with it being the boil scene in the show. But do you have a favorite scene from that episode?
Um, no, I don't think so. Honestly, that wasn't even my favorite episode. So that probably I probably haven't even watched that one the most. Um,
That's just the one that started you down the rabbit hole.
yeah, exactly. That was the first one, and therefore it always, that one scene just always stuck. I just remember those boils, man. It just got me down the dark hole, the dark side.
Yeah, and though, like I said, just it's starting off that way with,
Mhm.
just seeing it at the very beginning. Obviously, as the episode goes, you get more in depth. But when an episode just starts like that, that's a terrifying way for something to start. Like, wow, this guy's in a tremendous amount of pain, and he looks awful. So I'm intrigued to see where this goes. And a question that I ask usually is, would you like to see your first horror movie remade today? Now, since we're really not talking about your first horror movie because it's one that was kind of, at a dark time and, you caught it and you were, that was it. But would you like to see them try to recapture the Friday the 13th series today as maybe like a Netflix limited series or something like that? Is this something you would like to see them try to do again today?
You know, it's funny because I've entertained this question frequently with my husband and with other fans. Um, I I don't know. I think that I go back and forth. I think a reboot. I think that they would have to bring back Louise Roby as Mickey, because she was always like my idol. And I think they would have to figure out a way to bring back John LeMay as Ryan, who left in the second season, at the end of the second season, beginning of the third. And they'd probably have to bring back Steve Monarch as Johnny, who I never liked, but that's totally separate.
Well, I mean, I got to be completely transparent here. I had never watched Friday the 13th, the TV show. Like, I remember Freddy's Nightmares as a kid.
Mhm,
I don't even remember Friday the 13th, the TV series. So it's something that I was super intrigued when we started talking about this. And like I said, I started diving into it on YouTube, and it's something that I would definitely like to continue watching. So you've started me down the rabbit hole. And much like you, Elise, I can say Stick It in Your Ear was the very first episode of Friday the 13th, the series that I ever watched. And maybe eventually I'll say, you know what, that one's not even my favorite, and it's not even the one I watched the most, but it's the one that got me started down the rabbit hole.
yeah.
So we know that your horror life started with a little mixture of Freddy Krueger and Friday the 13th. I can't say Jason Voorhees, but I
No.
can say Friday the 13th.
Mhm,
But now I do want to throw a little bit of a curveball here at you for a second. My
okay.
buddy Ghostface is here, Elise, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Elise? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Probably Halloween, the 1978 original.
I don't think that much people can debate the impact that that movie's had. I've
No.
said this before. I'm not a huge fan of Halloween. Growing up, I wasn't really introduced to Halloween till later on. I was always a Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th kid. That's what I knew.
Mhm,
Um, but what I will say is, while Halloween is not the first slasher film, I think that Halloween 1978 perfected what you need in a slasher film. Where you have Psycho and you have Black Christmas, which is mostly about your protagonists and their defense against. Halloween 1978 is that perfect mixture of who the protagonist and the antagonist are and who the
mhm,
boogeyman is, and it leaves you with that feeling of just complete dread after you watch. And it's just a guy. That's it. It's just a guy. It's not some burned up guy in your dreams. It's not some kid that drowned in a lake and came back. This is your next door neighbor that snapped, killed his sister, and now he's coming after you. So I respect it very much. Did
yeah.
you watch the new trilogy, the
Yes.
Blumhouse trilogy? What was your opinion on that?
Um, my opinion was I did not like it as much as a lot of the first one, I thought was lacking a lot more than I think a lot of people. I didn't enjoy the first one as much as a lot of people did. I enjoyed the second one more than most people did, I think because it was just so bonkers. Um, and the third one, I was very disappointed in.
I feel like they went backwards. I feel like Halloween Ends should have been the first one in the trilogy,
Mhm.
and it went backwards from there. Like, it doesn't make any sense to introduce the character of Corey at the very end of the saga. It is just my opinion. There was one
Yeah.
time in the 90s I was wrong, so it could happen again. But I just feel like if you would have ended Halloween 2018 with the house and the burning and I just feel like that would have been the perfect ending to the franchise. And we could have had three movies with Corey Cunningham, instead of having Halloween Ends, the Christine remake. So that's
Yeah.
just one man's opinion.
yeah, it was weird to have a Halloween movie that wasn't really about Michael Myers at all, and it was just there was a lot of weird things,
Mhm.
weird choices that they made. And
And
then
I respect like Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Obviously, that has nothing to do
yes,
with Michael, but it wasn't marketed as a
yeah,
Michael Myers movie. Like, don't market this as a Michael Myers movie and give me Michael for 12 minutes and give me the worst possible version of Michael Myers that I could ever imagine. Now, I'm not the type of person to slam things. I genuinely try to be as positive as I can because if somebody is making art, I
mhm,
hope that there's people out there that enjoy it. I would never want someone to create something that goes hated. That's not
yeah,
who I am. But I just feel like they took a big swing at a curveball and it went completely under the bat and they struck out on it. So, just my opinion. If you like the movie, I'm very, very happy that you do. I
oh
hope that
yeah.
it was made for somebody and I hope that you're that target audience. Unfortunately, it just apparently wasn't made for me. That's just my opinion.
From from what I have heard from people afterwards, I was at the premiere. From what I've heard from people, fans of the franchise who are like really deeply involved in the Michael Myers franchise, um, did not enjoy it, but people like fans of horror films in general who are kind of not really involved in the Halloween franchise loved it. So,
Sure. I just and
take
I think that that's fair. I think that
yeah.
because we waited an extra year essentially for this film because of COVID and like Halloween Kills, we waited a year extra. And then with this one,
Mhm.
we waited a year extra. And it was marketed the whole time as this is the end of Laurie and Michael. This is the end of their
Yes.
saga. I wanted a complete story of Laurie and Michael. I would have loved it if we had the complete story of Laurie and Michael with Corey Cunningham involved.
Mm,
Have Corey survive and start a new thing with him.
sure.
I can't talk too much. I already said too much and a little bit of a spoiler there, but the
Yeah.
movie's available on Peacock, so I don't feel as bad. If you haven't watched it by the time this airs, that's your fault. But you could have
Yeah,
continued the
that's true.
story on with Corey after this. That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying. Um,
Yeah.
so
Weird
Alyse, it's
decision.
been a very, very weird decision. It's been amazing talking to you about how horror started for you and your favorite horror movie of all time. What I want to do real quick is I want to bounce back to Friday the 13th, the series. And what we're going to do, and I'm actually going to do this on the whole series, not just the episode Stick It in Your Ear, on the whole series of Friday the 13th, the series. And what we're going to do is rank this on a skull count. Now, we're not going to rank it on acting, production, score, nothing like that. Just strictly on how much it affected you in your life. And I think I know the answer to this, but according to my script, I have to ask you. So
Okay.
0 skulls means it wasn't effective. 5 means it was extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Alyse, what would your ranking of Friday the 13th, the series be?
Can I do 100 skulls?
You wrote a book about it.
Yeah, it was so tremendously influential on my life. I can't even begin to I mean, there's no way. I was literally obsessed with this as a child. I mean,
Mhm.
10 years old, 11, 12 years old, it was all I would talk about. E
And you had to
I
put
mean,
in work to figure, you had to go through the TV guide and figure out what was on at that
oh,
time. You couldn't just hit
oh,
guide and look and see what was on at that time.
yeah,
So
this was 1990 when I found it. It was right at the tail end of its original run. And I mean, I thought that I was going to when the TV station stopped airing it, I thought I was gonna die. I literally thought I stopped watching that TV station. I thought that that was somehow going to bring it back. When Sci-Fi Channel brought it back, and I just found it again one day rolling through the TV stations, and I cried. It was just, I mean, the emotions I have connected to this show are so deep and so varied. It's almost embarrassing, but yes,
I get it.
I it is. everything. And that's why I wrote this book. And I mean, my
It's
greatest joy is that, I can now say that I email every once in a while with Louise Roby and John LeMay, and like, they know who I am, and will just drop me an email every once in a while, or something on or social media or something, and it tickles me. It's
yeah.
like 10-year-old me is freaking out.
You get those feelings, and it's really nice when they say never meet your heroes, but when you can, and you can meet these people that have meant so much to you throughout your life, and they live up to the expectations that you built for them in your own mind, that's almost as overwhelming as seeing your name in Fangoria. These
It
people that
truly
have
is.
meant so much to you. Like when I'm not trying to, pat the back here, but obviously Friday the 13th has meant a lot to me. And I'm talking the movies, and I got to do an interview with Victor Miller. And that to me was like, I wouldn't be the person I am without you. And
Mhm.
I'm sure you feel that way about Friday the 13th, the series. You wouldn't be the Alyse that I'm talking to right now had it not been for that series. The whole trajectory of your life could have been different had you not stumbled upon channel 18 at one point in your life.
Yeah.
And to me, how special is that? That's what horror means to us. And some people that watch horror, they see people that are murdering other people, or they see reckless, but it's not. It's so much more than that. And the horror community is filled with the most genuine, kind, beautiful, sweet, loving people you could ever dream to meet. And
Oh,
we get together and we're like, yo, welcome to primetime, bitch. Like that's
yeah,
what we do. Like that's who we are. And the fact
exactly.
that it, it just tickles me, the fact that you've got people that have meant so much to you, and you communicate back and forth, and you've written a book about it, and you're literally living the dream. Like, it's amazing, and I'm so happy, and I'm so proud of you, and I can't wait to see where your trajectory goes from here. And to say that I have you as a friend now means the world to me. So I said this at the top, guys, but it's the end of the third act and the credits are about to roll. So if you haven't already, all of Alyse's social media links are down here in the description. Make sure you're giving her a follow so you can stay up to date on all the hard work that she's doing. Like I said, she's writing books, she's writing for websites, she's writing for magazines. If there's a pen and a paper, she's got it in her hand and she's putting her thoughts to it. So make sure you're giving her a follow on social media. Alyse, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.